Welcome to today's webinar, What is a Feasibility Study Anyway? I'm Stuart Reed, Executive Director of Food Co-op Initiative. We're proud to present this series of informational webinars for startup organizers and their supporters. Food Co-op Initiative is a nonprofit organization providing support and resources to people organizing new food co-ops across the U.S. Our work is supported by grants from the USDA, the National Cooperative Bank, the Cooperative Grocers Association, the Cooperative Foundation, the Cooperative Fund of New England, and by donations from co-ops and their members, people like you. Thanks. We couldn't do it without you. Food Co-op Initiative is here to help you get started down the right path and find the resources you need along the way. What is a feasibility study anyway? I'm Stuart Reed. One moment, please. Technical problem. Initiative. We're proud to present this series of informational webinars for startup organizers and their supporters. The Co-op Initiative is a nonprofit organization providing support and resources to people organizing new food co-ops across the U.S. All right, so sorry about that, folks. That's what happens when you're listening to yourself talk. So let's get back to the agenda. And anyway, we want to thank you for being here and taking advantage of these resources. We have many more on our website, and you can stop by there at www.foodcoopinitiative.coop, where you can sign up for our mailing list and find contact information as well. So during today's webinar, if you want to ask questions, you can do that by clicking on the YouTube logo at the bottom of the video and using the comment box on the YouTube page. You do need to have a Google or YouTube login to do that. So if you're on there now and you want to give it a try, you can type in a hi and tell us who you are, and we'll use this system for taking questions, as many as we can at the end of the webinar. This webinar is being recorded. It will be available soon, along with the slides from the presentation, at our website, foodcoopinitiative.coop, and on the YouTube channel, where you'll also find an extensive library of previous webinars that will help guide you from start to finish. Next month, we're proud to present Hiring Your First GM with Melanie Reed on November 18th, same time, same place. Just briefly here, I'd like to introduce you to our newest staff member, Mary Wilburn, who is joining us today in the background, and hope we will have a chance to talk to her soon and get to know her a little bit. We'll welcome you here, Mary.
Thank you very much.
Okay, then, let's talk about today's presenter. Debbie Swasuna of CDS Consulting Co-op has over 20 years of location research and site analysis experience. Her broad background includes work with big box retailers, smaller specialty stores, as well as with chain stores and independent retailers, and of course, food co-ops. She finds her work with co-ops especially rewarding because their activities are motivated by meeting member needs and serving their communities. Enjoy today's webinar, and it's all yours, Debbie.
Thank you, Stuart. All right, I'm Debbie Swasuna, and I work with many other consultants at CDS who work hard to support the development of new food co-ops around the country. My area of expertise is conducting market feasibility studies, which I also call a market study. So when you want to open a natural foods co-op in your community, you want to find out if there's enough sales potential in the market to support it. In other words, is the market feasible, or is the market viable? You also want to know what the appropriate size of the store should be, given that market potential, and also where the store should be located to best achieve that potential. And a market study is going to answer all those questions for you. Next slide. Thank you. Hopefully, by the end of this webinar, you'll have a better understanding of what a market study is and why you would need one. And I hope that you feel more confident about finding the right site for your co-op, because I'm going to spend a lot of time today discussing those characteristics that you need to look for when choosing a site. I think it's important to remember that any market study that I'm going to conduct for you is going to be most useful when you've already identified a specific site for your store, because the sales projection that I'm going to provide you with is heavily influenced by the actual site and location characteristics of your site. And lastly, you'll also learn when the right time is to request a market study. Next. Thanks. I've broken today's webinar into two parts. The first part is going to be the longest part, and I'll be going over the purpose of what a market study is and why you need this type of research. That will include an overview of what a market study is, the guidelines that you should follow when choosing your specific site for your store, and a very brief discussion on how I forecast the sales for your new store. Second, I'll tell you when you should request your market study. Next. Okay, let's begin with the first part. What is a market study? Next. A market study will determine the market potential for your co-op, which essentially tells you whether your market is viable for a co-op. Now, existing co-ops have used my study to evaluate different options different growth options to determine which path works best for them. That could be expanding the size of their store, but sometimes that's not going to make sense for them because there could be certain physical limitations where they can't expand their store into adjacent space, or they can't expand their parking lot, or both. So it might be better for them to relocate their store to a larger facility with better parking capacity, or if the market potential is even large enough, it might be better to open a second store within the market. So the market study will help you better understand which of those options is best for your store, either in terms of maximizing its sales or in terms of its more strategic value, which could be serving an underserved area or making the co-op less vulnerable to a future competitor. And speaking of competition, existing co-ops have also asked me to use the market study to help them determine what impact a future competitor like a Whole Foods or a Trader Joe's might have on their sales performance and what they can do to minimize that impact. And obviously, a newer startup co-op wants to use the market study to determine whether their market can successfully support a natural foods co-op. But it's not going to determine whether your store itself is financially viable. For that question, you'll have to work with Bill Gessner, who is another CDS consultant. He might even be listening to this presentation right now, and if he is, hi Bill. Anyway, Bill will help them determine what impact a future competitor like a Whole Foods or a Trader Joe's might have on their sales performance. And another technical problem? All right, thank you. That was distracting. So anyway, Bill will take the market study findings and incorporate it into a pro forma analysis. It's also worth pointing out that while my market study is usually done first and before Bill's financial analysis, there are going to be some instances where you might want to research your financial feasibility, your store's financial feasibility, or its financial capacity before spending the money to have me conduct your market study. And if you decide to move forward with a market study based on Bill's initial feasibility analysis, it would be very easy for him to update his analysis after I complete your market study. Next. A market study also evaluates the suitability of your specific site for your co-op. This involves making sure the store is not undersized or oversized for its market potential, and making sure your site has no physical problems like inadequate parking that would make it difficult or make it unable to reach its market potential. Next. All right, and since most of you have a lot of questions about how to choose a site for your co-op, I want to spend the next few minutes describing what to look for in choosing a site for your new store. Next, thanks. And these are just the highlights. First, let's talk about the store size. What is the right size? The minimum size that you would need in order to have what I call a full-line store that has all of the departments necessary for your customers to purchase most, if not all, of their weekly groceries is 7,000 total square feet. And 7,000 total square feet typically translates into about 4,500 square feet of sales area. And the average size of a co-op is about 10,000 total square feet. So, rule of thumb, if you're looking at anywhere between 7,000 to 10,000 square feet for your site, you're on the right road. Next. Thanks. Parking. Parking capacity is it's a very, 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 very important consideration for your store. Believe me, because I do a lot of market studies for existing co-ops that want to relocate because they have parking issues. Anyway, the rule of thumb is that you need 6 spaces for every 1,000 square feet of store size. So that's going to translate into 42 parking spaces for a 7,000 total square foot co-op. 7 times 6, 42, so 42 parking spaces. And that's for customers and staff. And you might even need less than this if you're in a downtown area where you expect to have a lot of walking customers. But on the other hand, you may need more if you're in a suburban area where everyone's going to come to your store in their car. Also, visibility. Your store should be, or your store signage, should be visible from as many directions as possible and from as far away as possible. That means you don't want to be on a side street, you don't want to be on a dead-end street, you don't want to be surrounded by trees. You really just want to be on a hard corner of a major intersection, or you want to be visible from that intersection. That would be fine. Or along the main drag that runs through your town. Doing this type of, like Stuart said, over 20 years, actually about 25 years, and I can tell you from my experience that of the thousands and thousands of customer interviews that I've done, most people say they find out about a new store by either driving by it or walking by it. So it's very important to have a highly visible location for your co-op, where you're just going to have to spend a lot of money on marketing to try and make people aware of your store and bring them to you. Retail synergy, okay. Nearby retail development and the extent to which that development provides good synergy is also an important consideration. So co-tenants like I have here, bike stores, yoga studios, bookstores, coffee shops, office supply stores, specialty bakeries, really any type of store that's going to serve the same type of customer as a co-op's going to serve, that's going to make a good co-tenant for you. There's also certain types of tenants that will generate good synergy, but they shouldn't be too close to your store. Examples are restaurants, movie theaters, and fitness clubs, also doctors' offices, and that's because they have high parking demands. Their customers and clients are going to tie up parking spaces for an hour and even longer, so you don't want that to be overflow into your parking lot. Next. All right, accessibility. So the ease or difficulty that customers can get to and from your store would be another important consideration. So you want your store to be located on a major road. Like I said, not only does it raise awareness of your co-op more quickly, but it also increases or expands its trade area extent. And it also increases how frequently customers will visit your store, particularly in combination with those other characteristics that I just said, that I just spoke about, which are good synergy and adequate parking capacity. I can tell you from all those interviews that I've done, I've also found that over the course of a year, people that make more frequent trips to your store over the course of a year will spend a lot more money in your store than those that only make, you know, a few trips, but their transaction size is larger. So being accessible and close to your target customer is very important to the success of your store. Next. Okay, a market study is going to quantify your site's sales potential, and the sales aren't just affected by demographics. They're not just affected by competition. It's also affected by the things that I just spoke about: the size of your store, the amount of parking it has, retail synergy, accessibility, and so forth. So a market study will take all of this into account in determining the sales that your specific site will achieve. Obviously, this estimate is a necessary part of your financial analysis or your pro forma analysis, and I'm not the financial specialist. That part of the process is handled by Bill Gessner, who, like I said before, is another CDS consultant. So once I complete your market study, you'll likely work with Bill on your financial feasibility analysis. And the slide that's up now is it basically summarizes the methodology that I use when I forecast sales for a new store. I'm not going to bore you with all the details of it, so this is just an overview of it. And the reason I've included this is because I really want to make sure you understand and feel comfortable knowing that this is the most accurate method of forecasting sales for a natural foods co-op. And in a nutshell, I use the actual sales performance of existing co-ops, to predict the sales for a new store. So the basic premise is that the census tracts or trade area sectors within a proposed store's trade area that have similar or analogous demographic, competitive, and situational characteristics as census tracts in an existing co-op's trade area should generate similar sales levels. So I'm not using secondary data like so-called natural food expenditure potential, which is also just a forecast, or market share analysis to predict the sales of new co-ops. I'm using the actual sales performance levels of existing co-ops, which is the best and most accurate way of predicting sales for a new co-op. So there's more to it than that, but that would probably get very boring. So that's just the highlight. And before I move on to the next section, which is it's really a short topic of when to request a market study, I just want to summarize what we've covered so far. So a market study or a market feasibility study, it evaluates the suitability of your store or your site for a natural foods co-op. It provides a sales projection for that site, but it does not include a financial feasibility study. Like I said, that's typically handled by Bill Gessner after I complete the market study, or in some cases before. And the sales projection for your proposed co-op is not only affected by the demographics and competition of your market, but it's also affected by the size of your store. Obviously, a larger store usually translates into more sales. The amount of parking it has. I have a lot of existing co-ops that can't grow their sales because they just don't have the parking capacity. So they're actually losing sales because of it. And for that reason, they ask for a market study because they want to look at options as far as maybe relocating or opening a second store. Let's see, the amount of parking, what did I say, size of store, retail synergy, accessibility, and so on. So a market study is going to take all of that into consideration in determining the sales that your specific site will achieve. All right. So let's talk about when to request a market study. So next slide. All right. So for new startup co-ops, okay. So this is a short list of things that you should do before beginning a market study. And the first question that I always get from new co-ops is, how much does a market study cost? And that's so they can budget enough money for the study. And the typical fee for a market study is $9,000 plus expenses. So you want to budget for about $11,000 to $12,000. So I can just let that number sink in for a bit. Well, I can't hear any gasping, so I'll just keep going. You also want to select 3 specific sites for your co-op. That fee that I just gave you, that assumes up to 3 specific sites for your co-op. I can look at as many as you want me to look at, but the fee would increase. And while you may have a preferred site, every co-op, generally, every co-op group has a preferred site, you should still work with a real estate agent so that you have some backup sites in case we find out that your preferred site is not financially feasible, or maybe it's acquired by someone else, or it's just no longer available. So you want to have those backup sites to follow up with in case the preferred site does not work for you. And you want to follow the site guidelines that I already spoke about in terms of looking for a store that's 7,000 to 10,000 square feet, making sure you have about 6 parking spaces for every 1,000 total square feet, synergy, accessibility, all of those things. And particularly, you want to be visible from a major road. And I have more detailed guidelines that I can share with you. So when you are at the point that you want to talk to me about a market study, I can go over those more detailed guidelines and give you a little bit more direction in that area. So All right. For existing co-ops, you should consider having a market study done to help you develop like a longer range growth plan for your co-op. It can help you determine, for example, how many other new store opportunities there are in your market, and generally where they should be located, which nearby markets could support a store, and if a competitor is rumored to, if you hear a rumor that a competitor is going to open a store in your market, the market study can help you determine what impact it might be on your store. And that is actually more common now than it has been in previous years. And if your store is too small, or if it doesn't have enough parking capacity, which is keeping your store from growing sales, a market study can evaluate the sales for different options, like relocating your store to maybe a larger facility versus opening a second store. And I've actually just completed a market study for, this would be an existing co-op in, it's in New England, and they don't have enough parking capacity and they can't expand the parking lot, and they're literally shuttling their employees to and from a remote parking lot so they can provide as many parking spaces as possible to their customers. But they're worried that this is still keeping them from growing their sales, and it's also making them much more vulnerable to the impact that a new competitor might have. So they wanted a market study to make sure they act as quickly as possible to fix that situation, so they don't lose sales to a new competitor, and they're serving their market better. Okay, so to summarize this last section, you want to have $11,000 to $12,000 budgeted for your market study. And if you're a new startup co-op, you want to have picked 3 sites for your co-op using the site guidelines that I went over. And if you are an existing co-op, you can use the market study as one tool in your longer range planning in evaluating all of your options for growing sales for your co-op. So I think that's all. Yeah, so I wanted to make sure that I left enough time for questions. It seems that the preference of the audience is to spend more time answering or asking questions of me instead of listening to me go on and on about market studies. So thanks for listening, and I hope this is helpful for you. And now we can spend the rest of our time answering any questions you might have. And I think Stuart will be handling the questions from YouTube.
Okay, thanks, Debbie. We have a question from Julie about, she wants to know how current is your data on existing co-op sales figures?
It's very current. That's a good question. I do market studies for existing co-ops throughout the year, and every study I do customer surveys so that I can incorporate that store into my database as soon as that market study is completed. So I'm constantly adding new data in, and then we have access to sales for all the co-ops. So right now my database is in 2013 data, sales data and demographic data, and at the end of this year I will update it to 2014. So it's very current.
Great. Another question: how long does it take to get the market study scheduled and then completed?
Okay. So what I do is I send you after we talk about what your research goals are, I send you a formal proposal. And the proposal kind of describes what the work plan is, what the cost is, and what the timing is. And the timing is dependent on a couple of things. If you're a new co-op, you'll need to send a retainer to CDS Consulting Co-op in Madison, Wisconsin, and you'll have to sign the contract. And the work generally begins about 6 weeks, the field work, where I visit your market to evaluate your sites and evaluate the competition and basically learn the market as if I've lived there my entire life. That field work would happen about 6 weeks after the retainer check and the contract is signed. And then the report is usually done anywhere between 2 and 4 weeks after that. So that's about, figure 2.5 months, maybe 3 at the most, from start to finish.
Great. Here's one that we hear a lot at Food Co-op Initiative. A local college has got a business school that does market studies for class projects. Should we use them?
Well, you could. I don't know that their forecasting methodology would be as good as mine, because I have access to sales by census tract for existing co-ops, and that's what I'm using, making comparisons from your proposed stores trade area to the trade areas of those existing stores. So if they were doing a market study for you, I would think it would be using secondary data. And I do get a lot of questions from people about, what is the natural foods expenditure potential in their market area? And there are data vendors that provide that, but it's modeled. It's not an actual number. They're actually using demographic data to estimate what the natural food expenditure potential is. And I've done work for different types of natural food stores, and I can tell you that the customer profile of a co-op is not the same as it is for other natural food stores. So it's not the data that they would get from a vendor for the natural food expenditure data is not going to be co-op specific. It's going to be more generic natural foods. So at least the market studies I do are specifically for co-ops.
Okay. If you do have questions, don't forget you can be entering those underneath your YouTube video. And right now, I think we've covered all that have come in. So kind of give you your last chance call. And hearing nothing, figuratively, I think we might be done for today. If you do have more questions that didn't get answered, feel free to contact me, or I think, Debbie, it's all right to contact you as well?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Good, and we will do our best to find answers for you, and that's why we're here. So thanks for joining us, and please contact us at info@fci.coop when you have those questions or are looking for anything. Remember, slides will be available after the show, and you can go to foodcoopinitiative.coop/slides and follow the link on the YouTube video afterwards as well. So we'll see you next month. Be here again, please, to hear hiring your first general manager, presented by Melanie Reed. Thanks again, and goodbye.